Once upon a time, in the quiet town of Makoko, there lived a 32-year-old man named Richard Walker. He had graduated top of his class from the University of Benin with a degree in business administration. He spoke well, dressed smart, and carried himself with hope, even when life didn't give him much. But no matter how hard he tried, things just didn't work. He applied for over 200 jobs in 3 years, went for interviews, did online businesses, even worked as a volunteer for a logistics company, just to get experience, but still, nothing. There was no big break, no small miracle, just silence. His phone never rang with good news, and his bank account always danced around zero. Richard lived with his mother, Mrs. Hannah Walker, a retired primary school teacher with kind eyes and soft words. She believed in him, even when he stopped believing in himself. Every morning, she would knock on his door and say, "Richard, don't give up. The door that will open for you has not yet been built." He would smile weakly, but deep inside, his faith was dying. He saw his mates posting pictures from Dubai, Canada, and other beautiful countries in the world, but his case was different. He still lived in the same room he grew up in, with a ceiling fan that squeaked and a window that wouldn't close. One hot Saturday afternoon, when Richard went to the backyard to clear fallen mango leaves from the old tree behind the house that had stood there longer than he had been alive, it never bore fruit anymore, but his mother refused to cut it down. "It has memories," she would say. Richard took his cutlass that afternoon and began clearing the dry leaves, but something caught his eyes. A patch of ground under the tree looked different, a small raised mound covered in leaves and old wrappers. He bent down and brushed it. The earth felt loose. His heart raced, not from fear, but from a strange feeling, like the ground was hiding something important. So he carefully began to dig with his bare hands. The soil was very soft, and within minutes, his fingers hit something hard. It was a clay pot. It was old, blackened, and wrapped in red cloth. Cowries were tied around the neck, and something inside rattled. Richard froze. Then slowly he lifted the pot out of the earth. It was sealed shut. But what shook him the most was a faded paper tied to the cloth. It had one name written in shaky blacky ink: Richard Walker. Richard rushed into the house, screaming at the top of his house, "Mom! Mom! Come and see." His mother, Mrs. Hannah, came out quickly. When she saw the pot in his hand, she gasped and dropped the water bowl she was carrying. Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Under the mango tree." Mrs. Hannah sat on the floor and began to cry. "Mom, what is this?" Richard asked impatiently. She didn't speak for a while. She just cried. Then finally, she whispered, "It's your glory. Your father buried it." Richard's knees gave out. He sat on the floor beside her, confused. "My what?" Mrs. Hannah wiped her tears and continued, "Your glory, your star, your future. He locked it when you were just 5 years old." Richard stared in disbelief. "Why would he do that?" he asked. His mother sniffed and continued, "He believed that you would grow to be greater than your older brothers. He thought if you passed them, it would bring shame to them, so he stopped it before it started." Richard's chest tightened. "Stopped it how?" he asked, confusion and disappointment written all over his face. "He went to an old man, someone who does protection charms. They prepared that pot and told him to bury it under the tree. As long as he stayed there, you would never rise." Richard stood up slowly. "You knew, and you didn't say anything?" His mother looked down in shame. "I was afraid and ashamed." Without saying another word, Richard walked back inside, holding the point, his mind spinning. The next day, Richard traveled to Ibadan, where his late father's old friend, Mr. Henry James, lived. Mr. James was now in his late 70s. He was blind in one eye and sat in a wheelchair, but his mind was still sharp. Richard did not waste any time as soon as he saw Mr. Henry. Immediately after exchanging pleasantries, he asked, "Sir, did you know anything about a charm buried under our mango tree back home?" Mr. James sighed deeply. Then he answered like a warrior accepting defeat, "I knew." Richard clenched his fists. "Why?" he asked. Mr. James stared into the air before he began to explain. "Your father feared your light. He was a good man. but a jealous father. Your two brothers were not as gifted. He didn't want the family name to be turned upside down. So he buried my life? Richard asked in anger. Mr. James nodded slowly. It was wrong, but in his mind he thought he was protecting balance. He asked me to go with him that night. I regret it every day. Richard returned home, angry, broken and lost. He couldn't believe his own father, a man he had prayed for, respected and missed for years, had been the architect of his suffering. He called a local pastor. They prayed, they fasted, and the pot was broken. A small ceremony was done, and for the first time in years, Richard felt something shift in the air, like a door had finally opened. That week, he received 3 job offers. The following month, he moved to Abuja. Within 6 months, he got promoted. Within a year, he opened his first business. But one night, as he lay on his new mattress in his air-conditioned room, a strange thought entered his mind. He remembered the old man's word. He buried your glory, but that wasn't the only thing. Richard sat up in bed, his heart pounding. He had to go back. He couldn't sleep that night in Abuja, no matter how comfortable the bedroom was. Something inside him was restless. The words of his father's friend kept replaying in his head. What else did his father hide? Why didn't his mother know? Why had everything only begun to work after the pot was broken? He sat up around 3 a.m. sweating. I have to go back. 2 days later, Richard took a bus from Abuja to Lagos and arrived at his mother's house in Makoko around sunset. The sun was low and the old mango tree swayed gently in the breeze as if it had been expecting him. His mother, Hannah, was surprised to see him so soon. I thought work was going well in Abuja, she asked. He hugged her. It is, but I couldn't rest. She looked at his face. Something is bothering you, she asked. He nodded slowly. I want to dig again. I have to. That night, with nothing but a shovel and a rechargeable lantern, Richard went to the backyard. He began to dig. Not where the pots were found, but wider, deeper. He dug in circles, sweat poured, his hand blistered, but he didn't stop. Then around midnight, the shovel hit something hard, again, not clay, but wood. He dropped to his knees and began to clear the soil carefully. It was a small wooden box, almost the size of a Bible. It was sealed shut with nails and twine. He dragged it out and brought it into the house. His mother gasped when she saw it. I've never seen that before, she said. Richard placed it on the floor. He picked the hammer and opened it. Inside was a single black notebook tied with a red ribbon and a folded brittle letter addressed to the child who will suffer most from my decision. Richard unfolded the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was his father's. If you are reading this, I am sorry. I was a weak man. I feared your brightness. I feared the shame of your elder brothers being left behind, so I did what I thought would protect the family name. I buried your potential and I buried my peace with it. But I couldn't bear to destroy everything, so I left this notebook, your real inheritance. Inside, you will find the visions God gave me, the gifts you were born with. I had dreams about your future, big dreams. You were meant to lead, to speak, to create, to change lives. But I buried all of it, not because I hated you, but because I hated how small I felt beside you. I hope you forgive me. This notebook will return what I took from you, but only if your heart is clean. Use it and be greater than all of us. Your father, James Walker. Richard sat back. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He hadn't cried in years, but now the pain rushed out of him like water from a broken dam. His own father, not a stranger, not an enemy. His own father had been the reason for his years of silent suffering. He untied the red ribbon. Inside the notebook were pages upon pages of handwritten prayers, visions, ideas and dreams. Things his father had seen in the spirit about Richard's future. A business that will employ thousands. A foundation for orphans. A book that will change nations. A voice that will touch the world. Each page ended with the same sentence, but I stopped it. That night, Richard read every single page. By morning, he knew what he had to do. He walked outside, stood under the mango tree and spoke loudly. I forgive you. You tried to kill my future, but God preserved it. You buried my light, but you couldn't destroy it. Now I will rise. His mother stood in the doorway, crying silently. In the weeks that followed, Richard's life began to shift dramatically. Ideas came to him in dreams. Doors opened without effort. He launched a small tech company called Rise from Roots, inspired by his own story. In 6 months, it was featured on national TV. He wrote a book about his journey, Buried but Not Broken. Thousands of young people wrote to him, saying his story helped them forgive their parents and find their voice. But Richard never forgot the pain. One day, he received an anonymous letter in his office. No name, no address, only 6 words written on a white card. Your father wasn't the only one. Richard looked up, and suddenly a cold wind passed through the room. Richard sat in his Abuja office, holding the mysterious white letter in his hand. There was no signature, no sender, just those 6 haunting words. He closed the blinds and leaned back on his chair. His hands trembled slightly. He has forgiven his father. He had found peace with his past. Also, he thought, now this? His heart beat faster. Who else? For the next few days, Richard couldn't concentrate. His staff noticed he was quieter, more withdrawn. At night, he read the black notebook again, trying to see if his father had mentioned anyone else, but there was nothing. So he decided to visit Mr. James Henry again, the old family friend who had helped Richard's father bury the charm. Richard took a weekend off and traveled to Ibadan, where Mr. James lived in a quiet estate. This time, the old man welcomed him with tea. Richard didn't waste time. I got a letter. Someone said my father wasn't the only one who tried to stop my destiny. Do you know anything about that? Mr. James paused. He looked uncomfortable. Then he took a long breath before he finally answered. Yes. Richard's heart sank. The old man wheeled himself to a corner of the room and brought out a letter from a wooden box. He handed the brown envelope to Richard. I've kept this for 10 years. I hoped I'd never have to give it to you. Richard opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in his mother's handwriting. Richard unfolded the letter slowly, his fingers shaking. James, I agree with you. He must not rise above the others. I cannot let Richard become greater than his elder brothers. He's the last born. If he becomes too big, it will destroy the family unity. I love him, but I agree. Do it. Hannah Walker. Richard felt dizzy. He stared at the paper, then back at the old man. You are lying. Mr. James shook his head. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way, but your mother was a part of it. Richard stood up. No, not her. She cried when I found the pot. She prayed for me. Yes, she regretted it later, but she agreed at first. We never forced her. Richard returned to Makoko that same day, without calling ahead. When he arrived, his mother was in the kitchen cooking. She smiled when she saw him. My son, I didn't know you were coming. Richard didn't smile. He dropped the letter on the table. His mother froze. She walked over and read it and sat down. Her hands trembled. Mom, why? Tears filled her eyes. Because I was afraid. Your father said if you rose too fast, your brothers would feel useless. He said it would tear the family apart. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of you. Richard shook his head, heartbroken. You buried me alive? I regretted it every day. That's why I cried when you found the charm. That's why I fasted. That's why I kept encouraging you, even when you hated me inside. Richard walked out of the house, tears burning his eyes. He stood under the mango tree again, the same place where his glory was once buried. He looked up at the sky. God, why? Why my own parents? He fell to his knees. Suddenly, someone touched his shoulder. He turned quickly. It was a stranger, an elderly man, bald-headed with a calm face. I watched you dig under this tree 3 weeks ago, the old man said. I've lived next door for 18 years. Richard wiped his tears and listened attentively. The man continued. You want to know why your life is changing now? Richard nodded. Because you finally forgave the people who hurt you and faced your truth. The old man handed Richard a small wooden cross. Your future was never completely buried. It was only delayed. But now, you have been unchained. He walked away without saying another word. Richard stood still, holding the cross. That night, Richard received an email. The subject was TEDx Abuja, speaker request. They wanted him to share his story, but the message ended with one strange line. Your brother has also read the notebook. Richard's eyes widened. Which brother and what was he planning? He sat in his apartment staring at the email. Your brother had also read the notebook. He didn't know whether to feel fear or curiosity. Which of them? Isaac, the firstborn, the one who always acted like the family's second father, or Daniel, the second, quiet but clever, who barely said much but always watched? He had left the notebook locked away in a drawer in Makoko. Only his mother had access, unless she had shared it or someone had taken it. Richard picked up his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring. Mom, did anyone take the notebook? He asked without hesitation. She was silent for a moment, then she said softly, Isaac came to the house last week. He found it. Richard's heart dropped. What did he say? Her voice cracked. He said, so this is why he's succeeding. And then he left. Richard booked a flight that same day and returned to Lagos. He called Isaac several times, but he didn't pick up. So he called Daniel. Daniel picked on the third ring. Hello? Daniel, it's Richard. Have you spoken to Isaac? There was a long pause. Then, Richard, I think you should come to Papa's old workshop tonight. That evening, Richard went to the abandoned metal workshop where his father used to work before he died. The place was dusty, broken and full of spider webs. Inside, he found Isaac sitting on a stool holding the black notebook. He looked up. You finally came, he said. Richard stepped closer. Why did you take it? Isaac's face was tired. His shirt was stained with grease. Because I wanted to know what made you special. Richard frowned. It wasn't the notebook. It was always inside me. They all buried it, not because I was cursed, but because they were afraid of my light. Isaac looked away. I read every page. I saw the things Dad wrote about your future, your voice, your leadership. He paused, with tears welling up in his eyes. And for the first time, I hated myself because I realized we tried to kill what God planted. Isaac stood up and faced him. Do you remember that day when you were 13 and you told us you wanted to be a writer? Richard nodded. You remember how your script went missing before the school competition? Richard froze. I took it, Isaac said. I burnt it. Richard clenched his fist. Isaac continued. I was afraid you would outshine all of us. I wanted to protect my place as the firstborn. I didn't know I was killing my own blood. He broke down and began to cry. Richard stood in silence. The truth was a heavy stone, but even forgiveness felt heavier. You read the notebook. Richard said slowly, now you have a choice. Isaac looked up at him. You can use it to compare, or you can use it to heal, Richard added. Isaac blinked. What do you mean? Richard stepped forward. You buried me once. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need my peace. He reached into his bag and handed Isaac a white envelope. When Isaac opened it, inside was a job offer, a supervision role in Richard's new company. I'm giving you a second chance. Richard said, use it well. After some weeks, Richard gave a powerful talk at the TEDx Abuja titled Buried But Not Broken. The video went viral. He was invited to speak in Canada, the UK, and South Africa. His foundation, Glory Reborn, began helping young Nigerians whose talents were ignored or buried by family trauma and tradition. He built a small library in Makoko, right under the mango tree. He named it the Tree of Second Chances. Isaac joined his company and later became one of its strongest leaders. Daniel wrote a book, and their mother, she became the foundation's prayer warrior and matron. One evening, as the sun set behind the mango tree, Richard stood quietly staring at the ground. A little boy walked up to him and asked, "Uncle Richard, is it true that they buried your greatness here?" Richard smiled gently. "No, they tried to, but God dug it back up." He looked at the boy and added, "If the world tries to bury you, grow. That's what trees do." The moral lesson of this story reminds us that sometimes the people who bury you are the ones who raised you. But if God planted your glory, no one, not even family, can stop it from rising. Forgive, heal, and grow anyway. That's how buried seeds become trees.